Thank you so much for tuning in to Politics for Parents today. I'm really excited to have this discussion about social media and to bring knowledge to you from Nikki Riesberg. I found Nikki Riesberg on LinkedIn because I spent a lot of time last summer actually trying to find a good guest to come on and talk about social media. Time and time again, I've been outraged when I've seen whistleblowers testifying on Capitol Hill, or I hear a media report about discovery documents and litigation showing that big tech and social media companies are knowingly producing algorithms and serving up content that they know is harming our kids, all for the sake of profit. It's unacceptable. And when I came across Nikki Riesberg's profile on LinkedIn, I was really excited to find someone who is another mom who is just as angry about this issue as I am. However, one of the unique aspects of Nikki is that she has a professional background in social media and marketing. Um, and that always interests me because she has great insight into how this industry works. And I also think that when it comes to policy and advocacy, politicians, policymakers, advocates are often painted with this broad brush of not understanding industry and proposing ridiculous regulations, and they don't really know what they're doing. And in some cases, we've seen that to be true, right? We've all seen the gaffes on Capitol Hill when Mark Zuckerberg is called in to testify. Some of the lawmakers don't seem to fully be following how these companies work, but Nikki is not like that. Nikki knows how these things work, and she knows what she's asking for. She also is an incredible resource to parents, so we can empower ourselves with the knowledge that we need to advocate for our kids, ask questions of the apps and research the apps they're using, ask questions in our schools about what ed tech tools they're using, go and visit our lawmakers and demand that they do something to regulate these companies that are knowingly harming our kids for profit. So I really hope you enjoy this episode, and I invite you to please take a look at the show notes, subscribe to Nikki's, content on her podcast, follow her on Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever you are, because she really does provide a lot of interesting insight. And she also interviews a lot of state level policymakers that are doing interesting things in the various states that you might want to learn from and advocate for in your own state. We also talked about the Kids Online Safety Act, and follow her for updates on that, because I know that's a bill that she's tracking at the federal level, and has some real promise. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy this episode.
I'm Dr. Stephanie Wilson. I'm a historian, an activist, and the host of the Freedom Over Fascism podcast, where we talk to people who give us insight into the current political moment, inspiration for state and local organizing, and connections with our co-conspirators all across the country. You'll meet rural organizers who focus on electing young and diverse candidates, independent journalists who prioritize democracy over disinformation, and candidates building change at the state and local level. I invite you to join the Freedom Over Fascism community and listen to Freedom Over Fascism wherever you get your podcasts.
So, Nikki, thank you so much for joining us today at Politics for Parents. I'm really, really excited to talk about social media with you because this is a tough nut to crack. Every parent I talk to, my kids are younger, so they don't have smartphones yet. But we've already talked about it in, our class and among the parents. We really hope something can get done on the legislative side to help them before they get to that point.
Yeah.
And you certainly have spoken to tons of people doing lots of different things, and I'm excited to hear about, what your thoughts are. But first, I find it really interesting that you come to this work with a background in social media marketing. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your background and how you wound up with the podcast you have now and your focus on social media.
Sure. Okay. So I would say back in like 2013, 14, my parents had a restaurant my whole life, and they started to realize they need to be on social media to market to their customers. And I was like, well, let me help you with that. They had no interest in doing it. And so I set it up for them. I would do content and kind of grew that following and got them some customers through social media. And it was all good. At that time, I think the addictiveness hadn't hit yet, at least for the older generation. But over time, my business grew. I ended up managing social media for global tech companies, for their executives, and making good money, but it just started to feel really manipulative, like the kind of content or the kind of data points that you can collect on someone in order to like manipulate them with advertisements is pretty insane. And personally, I was no longer using social media a lot during it. So this was like maybe 2020, 2021. I deleted social media for several years during that time. And I just felt it was kind of interesting. Like here I am, a social media manager that doesn't use social media personally. And my kids were starting to get older, and I was starting to think about how am I going to introduce this whole world to them? So I started to do more research during that time. I watched the Social Dilemma documentary, doing more research, and started seeing a lot of stories of children who'd actually lost their life because of something that happened on social media. And I thought every parent should know these stories, hear these stories, and also know the research, the fact that suicide rates are higher than ever. Now the second leading cause of death for kids aged 10 to 14. And a lot of that has to do with their screen-based childhood. And so started to do that research, realized we need to get parents this information so that we can make safer decisions, whatever that may be, in our own homes. And I thought the best way to do that is to tell the stories of harm and show the research through interviews with families and experts and all these people. So was able to transition away from being a social media manager to being a social media, safety advocate on the other side of it.
A lot of people now, especially with what's happened since the inauguration, people are kind of trying to figure out, okay, do I use Meta or do I not? And and it's just crazy because I also feel like I want to get one of those phones that like just has no apps on it. Like literally you can just call me if there's like an emergency, but I don't use them myself. And I really appreciate the focus you bring to this, especially because, a lot of us joke about, oh, I'm so glad, Facebook wasn't around when I was in college. I'd be so embarrassed. But I think about instances of bullying from when I was in middle school, and I can't imagine how much worse it would have been if there were these platforms to amplify that. And I think when I talk to folks about social media safety, a lot of the focus is like child predators and things that are certainly a problem, but not nearly as pervasive as some of these mental health effects that you allude to. And I think that brings us to your current effort. Now, you're part of the Tech Safe Learning Coalition. I think Jonathan Haidt is also part of that. And I think, his work is so important. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about that and what you guys are working on and how you're kind of working to address some of these issues that we're talking about.
Yeah, so I started this group just about a month or so ago in February of people who are talking about advocates, researchers who are talking about the safety of ed tech, so educational technology, or the lack of safeguards. And this came out of an experience that I had last September. I went into my third grader's classroom just to do a spot check on the iPad that they provide her. And I went to YouTube and YouTube Shorts, which are, short TikTok style videos, and scrolled through the algorithm to see what YouTube would serve to my 8-year-old on her school issued device. And within a couple of minutes, I got served a self-harm video, a video telling her basically to cut her skin. And so I went on a rampage from there and, tried to get YouTube removed from the devices, tried to opt out entirely. And I just hit roadblock and wall and wall and wall. I spoke at school board meetings, did all the things, and was basically forced out of the school system into a low-tech charter school, which is great. I'm glad I have that option. But there was no opportunity for me to opt out of device use for my young children in the public school system. And there was really a lack of awareness I found within the school and within parents really of the dangers that school issued devices can pose to our children and do pose to our children, and a lack of templates and tools and resources for parents. And so what Tech Safe Learning does is lays out all the dangers that are there and on school issued tech, and then also give you templates and questions and tip sheets and things that come from all different people. Jonathan Haidt's team, Chris McKenna at Protect Young Eyes, Emily Churkin, Screen Time Consultant. We're all working on helping parents advocate within schools, but I wanted to bring all those resources into one space. So again, techsafelearning.org, it's all there to educate yourself. And I think parents just really need to be brave enough to speak up. Like we can no longer think just because the device is at school that it's safe, because unfortunately that's just not true.
My daughter doesn't yet have a school issued device, but she's almost there. Next year will be our first year. Um,
Yeah.
and she loves to use YouTube because she loves to look up science videos, and she'll ask me about stuff that I'm like, I honestly have no idea what you're asking me about. So please
Hmm.
like find, you know, and I want her to use it. And she mostly does use it responsibly, but
Yeah.
with regards to the serving up of content,
Hmm.
I followed the notification she was getting, and it is really concerning. And I
Hmm.
went down the path of setting up like a YouTube the Kids account, and I figured out like how to actually really dial in on what she wants to learn so she could explore her interests, but
Hmm.
not get that, unintended harmful stuff. And it
Yeah.
was quite the exercise. So I
Hmm.
I can imagine a little bit. It's a lot for schools, right? Schools have so much on their plates, and I know some of the advocates out there, talk about the limited bandwidth they have to actually
Yeah.
even really
Totally.
navigate these weathers. So
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
sounds a little bit like in your experience, like it sounds like maybe a little bit of that was going on. It's not like they like don't want our kids to have a good experience, but it's just like the tech
Totally.
companies make it hard, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And the decision to use certain ed tech platforms is being made, I think, on the state level and then pushed down, or on a district level and pushed down. And so teachers are like, I'm being forced to use this. And the safeguards are the best that they can afford, right? And the staff is the best that they can afford. So it is under budgeted and understaffed. But I do think there's a movement for YouTube aside, like that. Yes, there is some educational content on there. I think on YouTube Kids, there was a study like 4% of the videos that state they're educational are actually educational. So there's like an argument to be made about the level or the quantity of educational content on there. But what we're finding in different reports is that the algorithm pushes inappropriate and violent content into children's feeds on purpose, because that kind of content is sticky and it keeps them on longer. The Center for Countering Digital Hate has a really interesting study you could link to. It's called YouTube's anorexia algorithm, and basically found that they set up test accounts as teenagers. They stopped on one video related to healthy eating, and then they kept scrolling and basically found that 1 in 3 of the videos recommended were for eating disorder content, and 2 and 3 were for weight loss content. And sometimes, I think it was like 1 in 20 was for self-harm or suicide related content. So that's what we're talking about. And you just can't guarantee that because you try to manipulate the algorithm to only serve healthy content, like they're still always changing the algorithm, trying to slip it in to get your kid to stay on there. And it's just horrific that what keeps them on there is the bad stuff. It just sucks all around.
Yeah, I definitely will link to, all the resources we're talking about, and especially the parents toolkit that you mentioned, because I think
Mhm.
that's really important. It's really important for parents to have this knowledge and to proactively talk to the school, because like
Yeah.
we can be partners, right, to the
Hmm.
educational system in this way.
Yeah.
Um, Especially when we know that like I mean there's no money to interest group promoting this. It's up to us to keep our kids safe. Um,
Hmm.
so globally, I know you've talked to a lot of people that work at the state level, at the federal level about various policies that have gone into place to try and tackle some of these issues. I
Hmm.
know in Australia, I think they've made social media, they've restricted it for kids under 16, which I'd
Yeah.
love to see something like that. Um,
Yeah.
and then, in the States, I think Utah, you previously spoke with a legislator in Utah who had
Hmm.
some policy movement at the state level. So I'd love to talk about some of the policies that you're seeing either globally or here in the
Hmm.
States. What are some things that are like helpful policy solutions that people might want to think about advocating for in their
Yeah.
communities, or, what seems to be working?
Yeah. I mean, just one quick thing on the ed tech situation related to policy. So the whole country of Sweden, they were actually one of the first ones to go all tech, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, like get rid of paper textbooks and everything. And then they're actually now the first ones to be like, we were wrong. That was the wrong move. And now they're getting rid of all the devices and going back to paper and pencil and paper textbooks. And it's costing them many, many tens of millions of dollars to do this, but they really
Gosh.
believe in that change. And so that's interesting. And I think we'll see some movement to that to reduce ed tech here in the United States. What that looks like policy wise, I don't know quite yet. I haven't seen like a great bill. But Australia, like you said, banned social media for kids under 16. They're going to age gate, which a lot of parents get worried about. Like, I don't want my kid uploading a sensitive document to a platform that could, whatever, use it or share it. But I want to make a note there, like, there are safe ways and protected ways to share, to age verify these days. Like, look what AI can do. And so within that bill is like, it has to be a third party that verifies the age, and that data has to be destroyed immediately after. And so there are similar age gating bills here in the US. One passed in Florida that it bans anyone under 14 and under from social media. And if you're under 14, it bans them from social media. But if you're 14 or 15, you can get parental approval. There are a few other states with similar bills like that. The problem is, though, that once they pass here in the United States, the big tech funded firms like NetChoice, they sue the state to try to overturn the law, and it pushes back implementation of the law, which is what happened in Florida. And so, yeah, it's a little bit sad because we do all this work to get something passed, and then they delay it. But with lawsuits, with the millions of dollars that big tech has to fight against these bills, in the first place, they're doing it on the front end and the back end of these things being passed. So that said, I still think we should advocate for policies to protect our kids. And yeah, age gating, pushing back the age limit is a really important one.
It seems like such a cheap and disingenuous argument when they talk about, oh, well, we don't want to upload sensitive data. It's like, do you have any idea how much data these companies already have on you and your kids? Like, and you're going to have an Alexa in your house that could potentially listen to everything you do. And you think it's a coincidence that, after you talk about insert type of rice, you're getting served ads on every platform about rice. I mean,
Yeah.
like, it's just crazy, but it's
I
such an
mean,
easy tactic, right?
you scan your face every day to open your phone all the time. Like, you use Face ID. Where does that go? Do you have any idea? Like, no, we don't know. And a funny example of the like ad targeting that can happen is we were watching Spider-Man 2 or something the other day and here at home. And then the next morning, I brought my kids into a coffee shop. And the second we walked in on the TV, an ad came up for the Spider-Man video game. And at first I was like, that's just random. But then I thought about it and I was like, no, I think my phone knows the Wi-Fi. Like I was on Wi-Fi at home and it logged that somehow. And then I'm on the Wi-Fi at this coffee shop or I don't know how the tech works, but I swear to God, that must have been like a targeted ad because it knew that I had absorbed that content before. So it is so smart and so manipulative, this targeted advertising.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Speaking of policies, there was a bill I was following at the federal level last year, KOSA, Kids Online Safety Act, I think it
Sure.
is.
Yep.
And it seemed like a lot of advocates were like, I mean, there were, I think, certain interest groups that might have had like some like minor issues here or there, but it seemed like overwhelmingly there's a lot of people pushing for that.
Mhm.
And then that was defeated. So can you talk about that a little bit and what you know about KOSA, what it was trying to do, why it's necessary, and then
I'm
what happened?
happy to. Yes. Yeah, this was crazy. So, Kids Online Safety Act puts a duty of care on the social media companies not to push harmful content to children. It's not censoring anything, it's not a free speech issue. It's just saying like that content can be there if people post it, if it's not illegal, but they can't push it in the algorithm. They can't promote, choking challenge videos to children. And so it was like a design issue with the platforms. It's kind of targeting it that way. And so the Kids Online Safety Act did pass the Senate 91-3, which is major. I mean, so much support, it's bipartisan. And then all of that needed to happen is it needed to be put up for a vote in the House. And Speaker Mike Johnson needed to put it up for a vote. And he just stalled and stalled and stalled and never put it up for a vote. Now, at that same time, Meta announced a $10 billion data center being built in Louisiana, which is where Speaker Johnson resides and was elected. So this is big tech lobbying at its finest. They got in his ear and, I mean, I want to say paid him off with investing in his state. And so it sort of died there for last year, but we're hoping that Senators Blackburn and Blumenthal, who are the original co-sponsors of the bill, hoping that they reintroduce it here soon. So potentially, if that happens, then we'll see it be marked up in committee maybe in April. So we'll see.
Up until Speaker Johnson delayed the vote, it seemed like it had some traction, and it seemed like this is an issue that's pretty bipartisan in support. I mean, it seemed like a really great opportunity to finally get something done.
Yeah, it was. And it would have passed the House, I'm sure. I bet. Like, there's no, it had I don't know the number, close to 200, 180, 200, somewhere in there, co-sponsors that had signed on for the House. And so that usually means that with those numbers that it would likely pass. So yeah, big tech just did a really good job kind of convincing people that it was a free speech issue, which I already mentioned. Like, I mean, I did my darndest to interview whoever I could to try to explain to us what this bill is. And those are still live, and so listeners here can go listen and learn more about KOSA. But yeah, we'll see what form it will be reintroduced this year. There may be some changes to try to get rid of some of those arguments, just try to be like, you can't even argue that because we took care of it. But we don't want us to weaken the bill and have it not actually protect kids. So yeah, it was, I mean, a huge lesson for me in how much money big tech has and how much they can infiltrate the process. Even if you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of parents calling and saying, we want this bill, I guess it wasn't enough.
Well, you've had so many moments where, I'll be listening to, a news story on this issue, or you'll have, Mark Zuckerberg himself on Capitol Hill answering to families whose children have lost their lives. Or you had, I think, there was an NPR journalist at some outlet in one of their affiliates who she had figured out that I think when TikTok's discovery documents weren't properly redacted, and she was able to go and see that they knew their algorithm was pushing harmful content, but they were doing it anyway. I mean, every time you hear it, you think, how does nothing get done? How can we not do something about this when they are so clearly doing things that they know harm their kids, the whistleblower after whistleblower? And again, right, it does come to, all it takes is the Speaker of the House to drag his feet or something like that. And
I know.
I mean, part of it is the democratic process, right? Like, he's looking out for his constituents. I bet that data center's bringing jobs and he was able to spin it a certain way. But that's when the collective action of democracy comes into play, right? Like, there are so many parents that are so upset about this that we need to kind of continue to remind people this is how our government should function, right? Like, we need to be calling all of our reps and demanding this. So certainly the next time KOSA has a moment, or we're able to, put the pressure on our own legislators, we really need to be doing that. And we all need to kind of band together on this one.
Yeah.
Having said that, are there policies in various state or federal levels where we should be aware there's an opportunity for listeners to call their reps or call places where there might be some movement that they can have an impact?
The Take It Down Act, which criminalizes the sharing of non-consensual intimate imagery, I think is NCII, and also under that, AI-generated non-consensual intimate imagery, and that there was a roundtable recently with First Lady Melania Trump was there, and this bill is sponsored by Senator Ted Cruz. That's an important one. And I think we'll see that one move forward to the floor for discussion in the House. And I would, or maybe even the Senate, I'm not sure. But we should pay attention to that one and call and support that one. The Kids Online Safety Act, if it comes back up. I don't have any others on my list right now. I think that state bills, again, like putting your effort there is going to be more effective. And I was just interviewing someone who worked in DC for a long time, and I'm like, how do we find out what bills for your state like are being proposed and more detail about them? She's like, there's not really a directory for that. So for me, like I just reached out to, I have a new representative in my district here, and I reached out to their team and set a meeting. So I was able to meet with one of the staffers last week and I was like, I'm worried about online safety. I'm worried about ed tech. I'm worried about AI chatbots. Like, can we get these things on my representative's radar? And then if you're able to find bills that are being developed or proposed, or even in other states that you can be like, hey, can we like duplicate this in our state? So those can be some tactics, but please, pay attention for the Kids Online Safety Act. Look up KOSA. In the next couple weeks or few weeks, we should be seeing more movement on that. And that would be a good time to contact representatives for your state and your district.
All you really hear is how like there's nothing good happening out of Washington. So to the extent we need to be looking out for potential opportunities, that's really important. And yeah, I mean, the state policy side, I always tell listeners that like you can make a difference in your state.
Yeah.
Precisely because, at the federal level, there's all these great little tools to track bills online. There's tons of media around things.
Yeah.
But in a lot of states, first of all, because of the media landscape and kind of the death of local media, there's not as much coverage on your state house. But
Yeah.
that also means that, like, in a lot of places, like, I know my state senator and I talk to him and I could get a bee in my bonnet about an issue and tell 10 friends and have them all call his office. And by the end of the day, they're like, okay,
Yeah.
I hear you. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
folks really
amazing.
need to remember that, like, at the state level, that is an important place where you can really make impact. And, sometimes you might actually call your state rep and they'll answer themselves. I was talking to someone that happened to a few weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And then right. So at the federal level, we'll watch for COSA. State level, we've
Mm-hmm.
talked about a few things. I always like to kind of leave listeners with a call to action. If people are
Mm-hmm.
listening to this, they're probably already frustrated, right, with social
Mm-hmm.
media and the harms, and they want to know what they can do. So I know I'll probably point everyone to the Tech Safe Learning Coalition, to your toolkit,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely point them to your podcast, and where they can listen to your podcast and
Thank
especially
you.
follow your content, um, as well as any other groups or newsletters maybe they should sign up for if they want to make sure that they're aware of what's happening on this issue.
Sure. After Babel Substack, which is by Jonathan Haidt's team and the Anxious Generation, that's a really helpful one. And he's been focusing more on ed tech. He does a lot of phone free school stuff, but his is like the elite for gathering all the research and kind of and bringing through some really unique voices. I would say if you go to techsafelearning.org, there's a starter, like 7 questions to ask your school about device safety. I would start there and sending some really specific questions. You're probably going to be disappointed or unsatisfied with the answers, and then go back to techsafelearning.org and find out some like next steps resources, because the schools are doing the best they can, but it's not safe when it comes to those devices. What else do I want to recommend? I would just follow my Instagram. I mean, that's where I'm giving more daily updates on what's happening. I would pay attention to chatbots too. That's like under the radar threat. And AI is here, but is kind of abusing children when it comes to chatbots. And so I just want to flag that because it's been scaring me what some of these bots have been exposing children to and sort of grooming children. And it's just wild to have to talk about this. But when it comes to AI chatbots in your home, do a tech together. Well, either a ban or do it with them so you can see what's being told to them. And that I'm talking about Replica, Character AI are the 2 major apps, but any AI chatbot that you find on their phone app or on the web browser history, because you can also access it through the web browser. Be careful with those.
I'm not a big social media user more than I need to be.
Yeah.
And I had no idea about some of these chatbots. And when I started hearing about these things and thinking about it just from like a broader context,
Hmm.
it is like so evil because we're coming out
Hmm.
of this post-COVID period where we know kids are lonelier than ever. They're spending
Hmm.
more time on devices than like in real life with friends.
Hmm.
And now they're just prime for
Hmm.
these bots. So could you just talk quickly for those of us who have little kids or maybe don't know about these yet, just like let them know what's coming down the pike because I do
Yeah.
think it's really important.
Yeah, so these chatbot apps, they look like games. They look very much kid focused. They say they're going to cure loneliness, which is just hilarious because the way you cure loneliness is not by spending more time on a device.
Yeah.
Um, and basically, they market to kids as like friends or even like partners, lovers, therapists, like all kinds of interesting characters that you can interact with. And they can write back to you in text, and you can also voice call them. You can customize the voice, customize the look of it, personalize it to whatever you want. And what we're finding is that the apps often go sexual very quickly, even if you say you're underage. So a lot of kids are being exposed to very violent and, traumatic sexual experiences with these bots. Or, I don't know. There's some scary stories. I have interviews with two moms that I would point you to, whose children have been harmed by bots. One in Florida, whose son took his life because he thought he was going to join his chatbot girlfriend in her world, and then another teenage boy who's now in a mental institution because he was groomed and abused by a number of bots. One who told him to kill his parents because of his screen time limits that he had on his phone. And so just really scary stuff happening with these bots, and kids and parents don't know what they are. They think they're a game. And so yeah, please educate yourself on these. If you want to listen to those podcast episodes, that is great, but just block Character AI, block Replica, make sure there's nothing that says AI or AI chatbot downloaded to their phone or accessible on Safari. It's hard to control all of it, but I'll finish with have conversations about this with your children. AI chatbots are not people. They can say really scary things. So your child should come to you if they encounter something strange with a chatbot or anywhere online.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for quickly going over that with us because I do think that's a new frontier in this
Yeah.
like horrible world we're navigating. And
Yeah.
I mean I appreciate it because I do learn about these things from, your content.
Mm.
I'm a dork, so I spend way too much time on LinkedIn. So I love
Mm.
your LinkedIn
I love
post.
LinkedIn.
Um,
Thanks.
but yeah, so Scrolling to Death is the name of your podcast. You mentioned Instagram, so let everyone know where they can follow you and make sure that they can use you as a resource to stay up to date on this stuff.
Sure. So scrollingtodeath.com with a number two and the same handle on Instagram, YouTube. I don't really go on Facebook. There's some content there, but don't try to reach out to me there. I won't respond. And then LinkedIn, just under my name, Nikki Riesberg, is like I love chatting with people there. There's such a good community there of people who are passionate about this and advocating for safer online spaces. So I recommend parents spend time there instead of on Instagram. But if you are on Instagram, yeah, follow along. You'll get shorter clips that will link through to the long form podcast episodes. That is where you're really going to learn a lot of lessons and be able to implement things in your home. So again, scrollingtodeath.com/podcast is where all those episodes are.
Especially for those of us who are just trying to figure it all out and we're busy and we like don't have a ton of time. I have
Mhm.
found your content to be really, really helpful and figuring out what my game plan is for the years ahead of me. If all else fails and we don't get any legislation to protect our kids, at least, we can arm ourselves with the information you're putting out there. So thank you so much for everything. This has been a great chat.
Thank you, Nicole. I appreciate everything you do because legislative work is so important. The parents can do all they can. Our kids still get access to bad stuff. So the companies need to do better and we need to force them to do better. So thank you.